So today I'm going to be talking about what I call the Lewis Chessmen. Say this is probably a misnomer because at least 8 of them are female, so we should really just be talking about the Lewis chess pieces. These are carved ivory, but not elephant ivory because it's from Northern Europe. Most of them are made from walrus tusks. You can see the dentine in some of them. So these are carved pieces of walrus ivory. One or two of the counters and I think a couple of the pawns are made from whale's teeth. And they date from the second half of the 12th century, sometime between 1150 and 1200, and they were found in the Isle of Lewis, hence the name, in sometime in early 1831. We don't know exactly when, but they were first put on display in April 1831 in Edinburgh, and so presumably found a little before then. The Isle of Lewis, here we go, is up towards the top left of Scotland. Ig Bay, where they were found, is on the coast there. The Outer Hebrides, and they were probably, again the stories differ, found in a little sort of hollow, something that had been made and carved out for them where they were left. But we don't know who made them, we don't know who left them there. What we suspect is that they were made in Norway, near Trondheim, although there's a very good case for them to have been made in Iceland. And the reason why they were in the Isle of Lewis, which that little arrow points to it, is that back then in the 12th century, that was part of the Kingdom of Norway. So the Kingdom of Norway stretched across that top bit of the North Atlantic. Norway, the tips of Scotland, the Scottish Islands, Iceland, Greenland. We know that before this, some of the Vikings had actually made landfall in North America. So there was this trading network across the top of the North Sea and the North Atlantic. The walrus ivory probably comes from Greenland. It was probably made and carved at workshops in Trondheim, which were famous for their craftsmanship, although there's a very good case that they were made in Iceland, where there was another expert female carver of ivory. Why they were in the Isle of Lewis, we're not sure. It's to do with trade in some sense, that they found 93 of these ivory pieces altogether, 78 of which were chess pieces from 4, perhaps 5 different chess sets, and then a handful of round counters for another game that was played, a little bit like draughts, and an ivory belt buckle that was also found there. It seems likely that someone was taking them to sell, either down in Ireland. There was settlements and very big trading links between Norway and Dublin, for example, or even in the Isle of Lewis itself, which had a powerful sort of local warlord, even though it was part of the Kingdom of Norway. Powerful local lord who may have been in the market for these things. One of the reasons why they're such wonderful things is that not only are they incredibly beautiful, and let's have a look at some of the carving on the back. This is some of the carving on the back of one of the queens. There's the back of one of the kings. You have these wonderful worlds and devices on them. Let's have a look at a few more kings and queens to have a look at, and all the pieces together, king and queen there in the front. So wonderfully well carved, lovely detailed stuff on there. But they also tell us an awful lot about medieval trade, the spread of cultures in the Middle Ages and before the Middle Ages, and also the structure of medieval society. Trade, as we've seen, these things were the raw materials of them came from thousands of miles away from the workshops. They were then taken thousands of miles further to be sold. The trade networks at that time was often easier to move across water than it was across land. So the Norwegians were able to have this trading network across the top of the Atlantic there. We also see in other places that a lot of trade between East Anglia and Europe, because it was easier to get across to Europe than it was to trade in other parts of England or the British Isles. So a lot of trade going on in the ancient world. Chess sets are obviously a luxury item. They're not a necessary one. It was a game, a sport, I don't know what you call chess, that was regarded as something that a nobleman, a knight, a monarch should learn. Knights, warriors were meant to be sort of strong mentally, but chess also taught them about strategy, about thinking, about planning. So it was a game that had come originally from India in the 6th or 7th centuries, worked its way through Persia, through Arabia. From Arabia it then came into Europe. So sometime in the 900s it was quite a popular, or became quite a popular game amongst the nobility, as was in Europe, and it maintained its position through then. So it was something that a nobleman and even a noblewoman felt they ought to learn, felt they ought to be very good at, which is again another one of the reasons why we feel that these chess sets might have been sold to some of the landowning classes there in the Isle of Lewis. But one of the wonderful things about the chess pieces are that they tell us a great deal about society, about the stratification of medieval society. So if we look at some of the pieces here, front left, sword across his knees, is the king. The king is the most important piece on the chess set, also the most important piece in medieval society. The king controls the kingdom. Lose the king, you lose the game, you lose the kingdom. Here we also have the queens, and all the queens and there were 8 of them in the Lewis chess set, have got this gesture, holding their hands this way around. And to us, this looks like someone who is almost fantastically bored with what's going on. But in the times when this was created, this was a sign of thought, of pensiveness, because the queen's role in medieval society and within the chess set was to offer advice to the king. In the chess sets of the period, the queen didn't have the power that modern chess moves have. She could only move one move at a time diagonally. So a very weak piece. It wasn't until the late 1400s that the queen could move across the board in any direction. And in the chess sets from the Middle East and in Persia, there wasn't a queen figure, it was a vizier, someone who gave advice to the king, and that seems to have stuck within these medieval chess sets that we have. You then have the knights. Any monarch, any lord worth his salt needed a large body of extremely mobile warriors, and the knights fulfilled this role. If you look at them closely, they're almost slightly comical to us, because the horses of the time that the knights rode on were much smaller than the modern horses. So the feet of the knight here are almost touching the ground, and that would have been how they would have looked riding into battle. But here you've got his shield on his left arm, he has his spear. Other pieces, we have the bishops. There's a thought that the bishops in the Lewis chess set may be the first time bishops actually appeared in chess sets. They came to as chess pieces quite late after the knights and the kings and the queens. So this may be one of the first chess sets that feature bishops, and the bishops that they have here are quite wonderful and chunky and stocky, carrying a crozier and a Bible. However, they weren't the sort of holy, devout, peaceable men that we normally or currently associate with being a bishop. Often bishops or bishoprics were given to brothers of lords or relatives of kings, because they were roles that had a lot of power behind them, a lot of money, a lot of wealth, great big landowning classes. Often the people appointed to these roles were not in any way religious or devout. My favourite is Archbishop Odo of Bayeux, who was the brother of William the Conqueror, who used to ride into battle. Here he is, centre on that horse with a great big club, and basically club people. So a little bit different to what we associate with bishops today. And then you might see, if you have a look at the group here, on the flanks there, two men with swords. Now, one of the things about the Lewis chess set is that there aren't any castles, there aren't any rooks. Those pieces are called warders, or as they're sometimes called, berserkers. These were the shock troops of the Scandinavian fighting men. Berserk comes from bearskin. They wore bearskins or bearskin tunics, and the stories of them are that they used to work themselves up into such a frenzy before going into battle that they were almost impervious to pain. It's where we get our English word berserk from. These ones have worked themselves up into such a state. If you look closely at them, they are biting their swords in rage, in fury, and their eyes are bulging out of their heads as they prepare to go in and face battle. Imagine if you're a little Anglo-Saxon peasant on the eastern coast of England, and 4 longships full of guys dressed in bear costumes leap out of their longboats, biting their swords, biting their shields, waving their swords in the air, and come charging up the beach. You're going to be going in the opposite direction just as quickly as you possibly could. And then the final pieces on the board, extreme left and extreme right on here, are the pawns. Very small pieces. Most of the pieces on the Lewis chess set are bigger than the modern pieces. They're about 10 centimetres, about 3 inches. So, big, sort of chunky things that you would hold in your palm. The pawns are smaller. Some of them are decorated, as that one on the right is, but a lot of them are even less decorated than the pawns in modern chess sets. They are completely anonymous, completely nondescript, interchangeable, and that is another aspect of medieval society. If you weren't a nobleman, if you weren't a warrior, if you were just a peasant, you were nothing. You had no say in anything. You were there just to do what the king, what your lord told you to do. You were the poor bloody infantry, and you had to make do with as best you could. Room 40 in the British Museum. So when museums open again, if they ever open again, pop along and see this. You can also see them, I think, in one of the Harry Potter films. They feature at the end of that. Finally, just I'll be posting this video up on the blog later on, along with the other videos I've done. The Twitter handle is there, so just let me know on the poll there what you might want me to talk about next week or in future talks. And thank you for joining me, and see you next time. Bye bye.